Hello, everyone. Welcome to GRIDLive post race. Very exciting show. We got IndyCar and, of course, NASCAR at Talladega to recap. Definitely, we want to hear from you. Be sure to share your comments, whether it's questions or your opinions, especially on the NASCAR race today. Definitely, we'll try to answer your question and share your comments on the show. With me, Kobe Lambeth from the podiumfinish.net. I'm Joe Samriego from the Grid Network. We thank you for watching. We'll get started with everything that happened at Talladega.
Yeah, a really crazy day at Talladega. We had three yellow flags before lap 15. Not one, not two, but three yellow flags. It was really crazy. As soon as that third yellow come before lap 15, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, it's gonna be one of those kind of days." And without a doubt, it certainly was one of those days. And those early wrecks, none involved were playoff drivers, but that would soon change in stage one. Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin bailed out of the pack because it was getting really crazy up there, and Clint Boyer as well. Joe, were you surprised, especially with Clint Boyer dropping to the back? Don't you think it would have been beneficial for him to get up there and try to stay up front?
Yes, especially early on in the race when he started falling towards the back. We know he was in the red coming into Talladega. Definitely was something where Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, they got such a huge lead in the playoffs. I anticipate that, but not for Clint Boyer. But it definitely paid off for Clint Boyer, at least at this point of the race.
Yeah, and to close on the stage one, Eric Almirola was leading him and Alex Bowman racing for the lead. Then we had contact, big crash. Kyle Busch, Austin Dillon, Joey Logano involved. Yeah, but Boyer, Harvick, and Hamlin all made it through that wreck. Do you think Almirola should have been that aggressive early on?
Yes, there's no way Eric Almirola could have just said, "Oh, Bowman's going to pass me. I'm just going to settle it in." He's in the red. If he had been freight trained back from first place to outside the top 10, he misses out on all those stage points. Of course, he did finish 36, which is significant. That is only 1 point. Had he finished higher up, he could have gotten 2 points. But he got only the 1 point for the entire race weekend. He was just in a spot where if he had not caused that, not been involved in the crash, he could have finished outside, miss out on those stage points, maybe get some others. But he's racing for essentially his playoff hopes, keep them alive, and it was just hard racing, especially with stage 1 points on the line.
Yeah, gonna be a must-win situation for Eric Almirola and many others heading into the Roval next weekend in Charlotte. And then stage two was underway. It was green for the most part until Ryan Blaney hit for the wall, and then Kurt Busch, never won it. Dago was fighting for the league, and unfortunately did not win. He got caught up in the big one that ended up collecting Jimmy Johnson, his brother Kyle, Clint Clint Boyer, Austin Dillon, really scary crash for Kurt Busch, went flying in the air, but luckily he didn't go over. Yeah, it's always really scary when we see those type of incidents on these super speedway races. And then Alex Bowman had a taped up Chevrolet, was still running, and this is really wild with all of these super speedways where it's just so intense and crazy. It always seems like all heck is gonna break loose at any point in the pack, and incidents like what we saw with Kurt Busch today, it was just a reminder how scary this type of racing is. Yes, I think with the current super speedway package, I think NASCAR definitely hit it right out of the ballpark. But at the same time, the danger is certainly still there. And going back to Alex Bowman, how impressed were you with the job that he and the team did today?
My goodness, they said in the post race show 16 pit stops for Bowman today just to make more repairs, more adjustments. They really show they have the heart and the attitude to try to get this championship. They could have easily said, "Oh, looks like we're done. We're not going to get a win. Call it a day," right around the back. They worked really hard to just try, and it really paid off as we see, as we get to later on the race, more trouble up ahead for a lot of playoff drivers. And I think it really demonstrates well, we saw Kyle Busch attitude after Bristol where they thought they were defeated, they were over. Here's Bowman. He just got into not one, not two, several big wrecks, and he's still saying, "Let's keep going. We could gain these points." And he's looking in much better shape than Kyle Busch.
And then after that, we had single file riding. With Joey Logano on the high line, hit at a whopping 204 miles per hour. Then the caution came out for debris. from Jimmy Johnson's number 48 car, and Johnson's car was all taped up. I went to the garage after getting involved in the big one. Yeah, so definitely not a good day for Jimmy Johnson once again. Then we had the restart, saw a lot more intense race, including Bubba Wallace taking the lead until hitting the outside wall. Definitely a huge disappointment for Bubba Wallace after running so strong. He's really his developing his skills as a solid super speedway racer. Then after that, had another caution. It was James Davison had a blown tire. They scattered debris all over the track, setting us up for NASCAR overtime. It was the 11th caution, which tied the record at Talladega. And and then later we broke the record having the 12th caution for another big one that ended up taking out Kevin Harvick, who was second in the grid ranking. Joey Logano, Kyle Busch, and Martin Truex Jr. were also involved in the crash, so not a good day for a lot of the playoff contenders. And then the race was moved to NBCSN because we unfortunately ran out of the time allotted for this race due to the high number of yellows and the red flags. With 12 breaking the record. Joe, do you think this was the most intense Talladega playoff race that you've ever seen? And do you think that the changes to the aero package played a role in that?
It was a very intense Talladega race for the playoffs, especially. The last time I can remember being this intense was the first year of the elimination format at Talladega. I remember just it was like every lap you just knew it could change. And of course, the first couple of years we didn't have stage points when they introduced the playoff, so it was really really stressful. That's when we saw Kyle Busch get eliminated with that crash at Talladega, which ironically that was when he and Austin Dillon got together back then. Here we are now. This new aero package, it has made it where racing towards the front, all over. We've seen so many wrecks all over the place, and it's so intense just because you do get a run and you can really push the other driver. With now the stage points, the playoff points, it makes it where we saw Clint Boyer. Yeah, he avoided the first big one. He was coming up, and then he got caught up in that other big one, which took out Kurt Busch, many others. And it was just amazing to see how, especially Kyle Busch, how many times he got in wreck and kept going. It was by far a very intense race, very long race, as even the folks at NBC have been pointing out, but definitely a very entertaining and probably, I would say, probably one of the best Talladega playoff races we've seen.
Oh, I agree 100% with you. Definitely one of the most exciting Talladega races that I've seen as well. But the action didn't stop there after overtime attempt number one. We had another overtime attempt and another caution in turn three for Bubba Wallace making contact with Ryan Preece, ending Bubba Wallace's day and Ryan Blaney as well, who crashed into him, and more were also involved. And after that, Bubba Wallace did take full responsibility for the incident, and he really saw today as a day where he just learned a lot and something he can stash in his memory for the future, because Bubba's going to be driving for Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin next year. So Bubba's going to have what we're going to assume is much better equipment than he's running right now. So yeah. Bubba let some laps, ran strong, and unfortunately they didn't really turn out how he wanted to. But all in all, it's still a solid day education wise. And then after that, Chase Elliott had to pit due due to running short on fuel. And at this point, the race had hit the 4 hour mark. And it's really crazy how long this race was. It honestly felt like, in terms of length, like the Coca-Cola 600, NASCAR 600-mile crown jewel, longest race. But Formula One and other series have rules on ending a race after a certain length of time. Do you think NASCAR should consider this? When you look at how many viewers didn't have NBCSN?
Yeah, it's definitely something where NASCAR may want to start considering. 4 hours, 15 minutes, this race was. The coverage, of course, was even longer with pre race. For NASCAR fans, we expect a crazy race every once in a while like this, but especially for NBC, and especially for the viewers that don't have a premium cable deal, like I know several folks that are gonna miss this race because they don't have NBC Sports Network. They only go off broadcasting. I think we'll see a dip when it comes to the number of viewers that continue watching. So it might be something more beneficial to have some sort of TV time limit where they say, okay, we're now pushing this part. This is going to be the end of the race, and at the end, it guarantees all the viewers the opportunity to see the end of the race. Because I think it's a big bummer, especially this has been such an exciting race. I just feel really disappointed for whoever was unable to see it. Hopefully, they were able to tune in through whether it was the Motor Racing Network or another way, another means to catch the exciting finish.
Yeah, and after the race, yeah, on Twitter when that happened, I saw a lot of fans were really angry, and industry folks as well. Yeah. When you're given that allotted time slot, NBC has to make the decisions what holds top priority over another. And I do remember the year when the NASCAR Championship race at Homestead ran late, and they were about to break into the Sunday night football crowd, and NFL fans were absolutely livid. But luckily, everything ended, and it wasn't an issue. The championship race ended right before kickoff, but it did cut into football night of America. But yeah, and this was definitely caught a lot of NASCAR fans and industry folks alike off guard by the decision to move the race from NBC to NBCSN, because at 6 o'clock on my NBC station, all they were just showing was the local news and that type of stuff. I can just log onto the NBC website and just read the local news. I don't necessarily have to see it, and it's just really, I understand that this is a business and all. It's just really unfortunate, something that shouldn't have happened. Maybe this brings back the conversation where people are talking about maybe NASCAR should try to have earlier start times. And if we had started this race a lot sooner in the day, maybe it wouldn't have come to this. And those fans who don't have cable, they could have watched the end of the race. I'd be really mad if I was a fan and I had to, and I would like watch the entire race except for the final two laps. I would be absolutely livid. So I understand where some people are coming from as well. And to make matters worse, this is a NASCAR playoffs race. It's not just a race in the regular season. So here's my question for you, Joe. Do you think that, considering that these are playoff races, do you think that playoff races should hold higher priority over the local news? And do you think that although NASCAR and TV, they're looking for ratings, do you think that earlier start times is something that they might have to consider to avoid these type of conflicts?
That's a really good question. Definitely when it comes to, especially for NASCAR fans, the playoffs, it's a big deal. I mean, we wouldn't want to miss a playoff race because we didn't have access to a premium sports cable channel and get stuck with local news. I know in the West Coast it's even more different. It's still not time for the local news here. That'll be coming in about 15 minutes over here. So it's definitely one of those deals where I feel it is a big loss for both parties, where a race has to end on the network for other commitments. With that said, though, it got to be something where the network and NASCAR can agree on something. We know NASCAR doesn't exactly bring the big television ratings like it used to, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s. So, in the instance of if there was an NFL game and NASCAR, the NFL game will probably draw more ratings. They're going to get that bigger preference of being on the big NBC channel. I think one of the big things NASCAR could look at is definitely something where we have to change to where the racing won't go so long. 4 hours and 15 minutes. That is something where we don't rarely see a Talladega race go this long. But definitely, we're not in a case where we could just have NBC or Fox in the future just be willing to commit all that television time for NASCAR. It might be time, I think, for NASCAR to start looking into, okay, if we do it earlier start time, how much earlier? Especially if we know we have to be off the air by this time in case we have a crazy race. Because we've seen some races go really quick. I think Bristol was a pretty fast race this year with very few cautions. And then, of course, they could also introduce something such as a time limit. Formula One, it's essentially 4 hours they have to try to end the race, especially with 2 hour racing time. So it might be something where NASCAR could start looking into that just to assure everyone, okay, if we reach 3.5 hours for most races and we're not done, we're going to be wrapping up shortly to assure everyone gets to watch the finish.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything you said. And now heading back to the entree action, the race is coming to the last lap. They're packed, they were not organized. It was like really crazy. Matt DiBenedetto was leading as all of the drivers were jockeying for position, and Denny Hamlin ultimately got around everyone to win the race. But there was a little bit of controversy because Denny Hamlin, it looks like he went below the yellow line and advanced his position, and NASCAR did investigate the finish after Denny Hamlin nipped Matt DiBenedetto at the line, and after a third review, no action was taken, and Denny Hamlin kept the win. And there were a lot of boos post race. Do you think NASCAR made the right call declaring him the winner? And do you think that maybe they should have looked a little bit carefully at that because I've seen there were a lot of angry people.
Oh man, thank goodness I am not the NASCAR official making these calls. Looking at that, we saw how the Benedetto, which did get penalized for pushing William Byron below the yellow line. The question is, of course, did Denny Hamlin really advance his position by going under the yellow line, or was it more because he was avoiding essentially the 20 and the 17, which got together? That sort of pushed him below. That while he was still down there, of course, he got around William Byron and Matt Benedetto. This is something where it's a judgment call by NASCAR. I know a lot of fans were pulling for Matt Benedetto. They really wanted to see him get the Wood Brothers' 100th win. And he came up so close again and again to Denny Hamlin, just like at Bristol last season. It's something where for NASCAR, I think NASCAR really has to start thinking about, do we want to put ourselves in a situation where we're going to make a decision that's going to affect the outcome? Because along with allowing Hamlin to win, Matt Benedetto gets penalized. He drops back to 21st. Chase Elliott gets a penalty from the last lap. He drops back to 22nd. So a lot of decisions by the NASCAR officials today when it came to the yellow line, and we saw even earlier NASCAR was making decisions on the yellow line as well.
Yeah, they penalized Chase Elliott and Matt Benedetto for a yellow line violation. And it's funny we're on this subject because we just have breaking news coming from NASCAR. In the NASCAR post race report, they say that the penalty to Chase Elliott for passing below the yellow line has been rescinded. So, and in NASCAR's judgment, they believe that Chase Elliott was forced below the W yellow line, so Chase Elliott is going to get his finish result back. And instead of Chase Elliott, they decided to penalize the number 17 Ford Mustang of Chris Buescher. So, Joe, with this breaking news coming in, what's your initial thoughts on this?
Man, this just, I think, makes the case where a lot of people may want to see NASCAR get out of this judgment call because here we are. We're 19 minutes in the air. I know we're approaching nearly an hour since the race has ended, and here we are still changes. I mean, could Matt Benedetto make the case to NASCAR? Could William Byron? I mean, this is just where I think it really hurts the product. Let them race. I know, especially here we are getting this late breaking news. This is going to again change the playoff picture because now Chase Elliott is going to go back to where he was finished originally, and now Chris Buescher is going to fall all the way back. Of course, Chris Buescher is out of the playoffs, but now this changes the playoff picture again some more to where Chase Elliott is going to be in a better position entering a roval track that he's really good at.
Yeah, yeah, you brought up a really good point. Now 20 minutes into our program, and we're still getting updates and news about this controversial situation. This is really crazy because fans who left the track, and driving home or wherever they come from, they don't know. All they know is that Chase Hill and Matt DeBando got penalized, and Denny Hamlin declared the winner, and they're leaving the track unknowingly to them that now Chase Elliott's penalty has been rescinded and Chris Buescher penalized instead. Yeah, this is really messy situation here. But Dale Earnhardt Jr. did say that he thinks that it's time for NASCAR to get rid of the double yellow line rule. Do you think that's a good idea? And it's just time to just let that rule go because it creates more problems than it actually would if we didn't have it.
Yes, I think now we're at the point where NASCAR should consider getting rid of that rule. It was created after the 2001 Daytona 500. That race, we saw a lot of drivers go below the yellow line to advance their position. And of course, we had a really big wreck exit in turn two, in which Tony Stewart got airborne. And then, of course, the fatal crash at the end of the Daytona 500. I do see where NASCAR, the product, especially now with this aero package, most of the crashes was from blocking. Eric Almirola blocking on the high side, hit the outside wall. We saw a contact exiting the trioval that got Kurt Busch airborne. Bubba Wallace just closed Talladega racing, thought maybe he could get in front of Ryan Preece for a push. We had that wreck. The yellow line is not really, we're not in a situation where drivers are going below the yellow line and causing wrecks. With that said, though, if they got rid of the yellow line rule, Now you got the element where you could have a driver position themselves to go below the yellow line and potentially cause a wreck. A good race to see this, the 2000 Winston 500 at Talladega. Drivers are going all the way down to the grass in the backstretch. Really intense racing, very good racing. Dale Earnhardt Sr. did win that race, but definitely, if they got rid of the rule, of course, now we have that issue. But at the end, we don't have NASCAR making judgment calls that could affect the race, leave fans displeased, some fans rejoicing because their driver didn't benefited from the ruling. And I think it'll just bring a lot more clarity and make it where NASCAR officials are not making these judgment calls.
Yeah, and people don't really like to be in these controversial situations. I think it really is time that we really look into getting rid of the double yellow line rule. And Scott Miller of NASCAR did say after the race that he doesn't anticipate like having a discussion or a meeting about abolishing this rule. So I guess based on what he said, we're probably gonna still be the rule at the super speedways, but we'll just have to wait and see when fans have made an outcry of something that they really don't like before. NASCAR stepped in and made changes, and maybe this could just be the tip of the iceberg to get them to do this. But for right now, unfortunately, for everyone who wants to see the double yellow line rule disappear, doesn't really look like it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, it doesn't appear the double yellow line rule is going to disappear anytime soon. Definitely would like to hear from our viewers. What do you think of the yellow line rule? Should NASCAR keep the yellow line rule? Let us know in the chat room. We'll be more than happy to read your comments in the chat room as well. And definitely any other questions about today's NASCAR race, let us know. We will be talking more about NASCAR later on the program. We now want to do a quick recap on the IndyCar race yesterday, the Harvick Grand Prix. Been really interesting. After their first race at Gateway Speedway, Scott Dixon had a 170-point lead over Joseph Newgarden. Today, after this weekend's racing, it's only 32 points. Since Gateway, Joseph Newgarden, on average, has earned about 17 points per race. Race 2 at the Harvick Grand Prix yesterday, Will Power star on the pole, Scott Dixon 15th place. A lot of great racing all around, but the battle, of course, was for the points between Joseph Newgarden and Scott Dixon. Powers had a hard charge and Colton Herta right behind him, making it for a close finish. But Will Power, from the pole, the start to the end, makes it a Penske sweep for the race weekend at Indianapolis. Joseph Newgarden finished ahead of Scott Dixon again, 4th place compared to Dixon's 9th place. Kobe, what was your thoughts on the Harvick Grand Prix weekend?
Absolute domination by Team Penske. Yeah, it was a Penske perfect weekend, and I think one of the biggest storylines coming out of the weekend is the collapse of Scott Dixon. I know we're gonna get into Scott Dixon a little more in a bit, but I think it's really crazy how Scott Dixon started off the season. He was absolutely obliterating the competition, and now it seems like that Scott Dixon got left behind at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway or something, because since the Indy 500, when he finished up there next to Takuma Sato, it was just really crazy how far Scott Dixon has fallen since then. He's still running well, but he's not running like Scott Dixon normally is. And heading into the Firestone Grand Prix of St. Pete for the season finale, I really do think that Joseph Newgarden will put the pressure on him.
Yeah, Joseph Newgarden is going to really bring the pressure. And you bring up a good point. It seems like it's been a collapse of Scott Dixon from early on. Now, here's the scenario for the final race at St. Petersburg. We have a 32-point difference between Scott Dixon, the leader, and Joseph Newgarden. Dixon will win the championship with a 9th place finish or better. Newgarden needs to win, and Dixon 12th or lower. Of course, if Newgarden was to get second, Dixon could finish 22nd or worse, because there's a big drop, 10 points between first place to second place. And this is assuming if Joseph Newgarden scored no bonus points. You earn bonus points from winning the pole, leading the lap, and leading the most laps. So 50 points for a win, 54 points if you were to do what Will Power did today. Considering the scenario for the championship, is Scott Dixon still the favorite to win the championship?
I believe that although Scott Dixon has fallen off in his form recently, I think this is still in his wheelhouse because, like you mentioned, he can just win the championship with a ninth place finish or better. And considering how solid Scott Dixon is on the streets of St. Pete, I think a ninth place finish or better is certainly doable for him. But and however, I've used this analogy in sports in other sports. Like in basketball, when my team barely wins, I'm being like I'm glad the clock ran out, or in football, be like, "Will, I'm glad that offense is not going to get another chance to go down the field and score a touchdown, or we lose." I feel like this is the same thing with Scott Dixon. I think Scott Dixon better be lucky that the season is coming to an end after St. Pete. Otherwise, if we had more races on the schedule, I think the momentum is certainly on Joseph Newgarden's side, and Scott Dixon would be in trouble.
Yeah, it definitely appears Scott Dixon is in trouble. Seems to have lost form. It's just been really interesting because he looks so hard to beat, almost unbeatable. And I think we even talked about how if he doesn't get this championship, it will be something of like a monstrous letdown mishap. And that's what seems to be happening, and just so slowly. Newgarden has the momentum. Yesterday we said he has to get within that 30 to 35 point window. Well, he got himself to 32 points. For Joseph Newgarden, is it easier to go out there knowing you have to dominate, go out there, get the win, pull if you can, or some more distracting, knowing that you essentially need Dixon to also have bad luck, even if you were to dominate the entire race?
To be honest with you, I think the pressure is really on Scott Dixon right now because like you mentioned, he hasn't been on form at all since I believe the Indianapolis 500, and this has been a really frustrating time for him. I believe if Scott Dixon goes out and loses this championship, it'll certainly be one of the biggest chokes that I've ever seen in a long time, because with that type of lead, Scott Dixon really should have clinched his championship a long time ago. And with his current form right now, is if in Joseph Newgarden, if he goes out and wins the championship, I don't know how, I mean, Scott Dixon will still be one of the top race car drivers of all time when you look at everything that he's accomplished all across motorsports, especially everything he's done in IndyCar. It'll really be one of the top five all time greats in IndyCar. But if Scott Dixon somehow blows this championship, it's not really going to look good for him at all. And with Joseph Newgarden, I think he just needs to go out there, just execute a normal weekend, and just let whatever happens happens. But I really do think all the pressure is on Scott Dixon.
A lot of pressure on Scott Dixon. And I agree with you. I would say it would become one of the biggest collapses for a sports team, really, in almost any sport. He had such a huge lead. We were talking about how he could have left with essentially the championship wrapped up a few weeks ago. Now, that's not the case, and he is, in my opinion, the underdog. He is the person under more pressure. He cannot afford another rookie mistake like in Mid Ohio. He can't afford a poor qualifying run. Needs to go out there, reclaim his form, and it's just so surprising that Scott Dixon will easily be one of the greats. But it'll be something else to say he's one of the best drivers, but he definitely had that big collapse in 2020. Now, of course, 2020 has been not exactly the most usual year. Originally, there was supposed to be 18 events for the IndyCar series. Out of those, 4 events were unable to be rescheduled, whether it was through additional double headers or additional stops at racetracks. Had it been the original schedule, of course, we would have a lot more road courses. Would this have changed anything with the points and how the racing season has been going for the IndyCar series?
I think it certainly would have changed things a little bit because some of the tracks that lost dates, I think it would have played into some drivers' hands instead of racing at the current tracks that we were able to race at this year. And first and foremost, I'm really happy that Roger Penske and his team were able to put together and save the 2020 IndyCar season, because when everything shut down, got down there for St. Pete and all, getting prepared for St. Pete and all of that, and nothing happened. I know it was like really frustrating for all those in charge, and I do think that Roger Penske deserves a lot of credit for how everything turned out, and and hopefully moving forward we can have a more normal 2021 season, and IndyCar can go to all of the races that they're planning to go to next year. But I do think if we had tracks, like the Long Beach Grand Prix Dakota, the streets of Toronto, Barber. I certainly think that the championship will look a little bit different than it does right now.
As well, one of those things where the racing this year, as best as it could be, we had a lot of tracks where I feel Scott Dixon would have been performing a lot more better, getting the wins, and so on. But definitely, it's been something else. I know the next race for the IndyCars is October 25th at St. Petersburg, the championship round for the NTT IndyCar Series. Saturday, October 4th, of course, GRIDLive pre-race will preview the championship battle for the IndyCar, as well as all the racing going on that weekend. Now let's go back to NASCAR, and we want to hear from you, the fans, our viewers. Did you enjoy the Talladega race? Tell us. We want to share your comments on the air.
Yeah. Now it's time to go close out with some NASCAR. And today's race, as we mentioned earlier in the program, it was a long one, 4 hours, 15 minutes, and 40 seconds. A long day at the office, right? And then looking at everything that happened after this race, Denny Hamlin and Kurt Busch are advancing to the round of 8 in the playoffs. Kevin Harvick is 68 points above the cut line, and he will advance. And in eighth place is 21 points over the cut line. That's Joey Logano. Kyle Busch and Austin Dillon in trouble heading into the Charlotte Roval, 21 points below the cut line. Are the top 8 safe? And do you think that if something crazy could happen at the Roval that could shake everything up?
Definitely something crazy could happen at the Roval to shake up the standings more. The big thing this year in the Roval, when they enter the Tums heartburn turn, that is the first time they're going to do it the entire weekend. No practice, no qualifying. We saw how that affected the first lap of the Talladega race. Christopher Bell tire went down on the first lap, collected Tyler Reddick. That put them behind. Bubba Wallace got some minor damage, had to tape it up. We've seen what happened the first year on the heartburn turn when Kyle Larson, Brad Keselowski, a bunch of drivers all just went straight. They locked up the tires into a heartburn turn wall. That could happen to a playoff driver, especially the playoff drivers are all going to be starting up front towards the pack. And some of the more desperate drivers, Kyle Busch, Eric Almirola, when they start the race Sunday at the Charlotte Roval, they're not going to be within the first 3 rows. They're probably going to be in row 4, 5, or 6 because of their poor performance at Talladega today. It's going to be a really chaotic race. Yeah, 21 points sounds like a good number, but remember, that's only 2 stages, 20 points max. So anything could happen.
Yeah, definitely. Anything can happen. Always looking forward to the Charlotte Roval. I'm actually gonna be a little disappointed because this will be my first year not there covering the race, and really gonna be disappointed not being not being able to go to the track one time in 2020. But definitely looking forward to 2021 and beyond. 'Cause I know great things are coming, and the Charlotte Roval never disappoints. It's been an entertaining event, and we did mention the current point situation, and we'll be sure to update that for all of you because with the Chase Elliott penalty being rescinded, that's going to change things up a little bit, and we'll have the latest for you on Wednesday. Grit tonight, and Bob Pockers from Fox Sports said that Chase Elliott's team filed a formal protest, which initiated the NASCAR review of his penalty, and then they ended up rescinding the penalty and penalizing Chris Buescher.
Crazy stuff hearing all the news going on around NASCAR. Definitely, we encourage everyone to in the chat room. I know one of our viewers said great point about the Charlotte Roval, and we've seen how brutal that turn can be. The heartburn turn 1. I know when it comes to the Roval, just to get a little bit into that event, it's an elimination race. We've seen Eric Almirola been the center of attention. This week, he went out really early. If you had to be one of the drivers in the Roval race and in the elimination stage, who do you think is going to be most likely to pull off an upset and somehow get out? Because the bottom 4, 21 points below, that looks really hard for all of them.
Hmm. Well, actually, people might think I'm crazy for saying this, considering that it's still 2020. I could really see Kyle Busch, with the walk off winning at the Charlotte Roval, and we all know it hasn't been the year that Kyle Busch has won it. It's really crazy that that we're in the month of October and Kyle Busch still hasn't won a NASCAR Cup Series race yet. But I feel like with his back against the wall, Kyle Busch can go off and hit that home run and lock himself into the round of 8.
It'll be really interesting to see if Kyle Busch could do that indeed. Now, we have a question from a viewer we see in the chat room. Why was Hamlet not punished for advancing position under the double yellow line? Yes, he was forced. I know this is definitely one of those things where, we saw some other drivers that were forced down. Of course, this is a NASCAR judgment when it comes to these penalties. Kobe, do you have anything to add in regards to NASCAR's decision making, especially with the yellow line rule?
Well, Joe, in order to give like a more what I believe would be an educated opinion, I still need to sit down and watch the replay a few more times. Yeah, I did watch it, but everything is still fresh. I think that maybe this is a topic that we should revisit on Wednesday night during Grid Tonight, when we've had a few days to analyze and look at the video to form our thoughts. But it did look like that Denny Hamlin did go below. Yeah, it really did look like he did go below the yellow line and advance his position. So yeah, I'm also curious to know as well, why wasn't Denny Hamlin penalized for this?
Yeah, you bring up a good point with Denny Hamlet. What it appears, it seems like he went below the yellow line to avoid Eric Jones, Chris Buescher. They had gotten together. He went below. He stayed below the yellow line and got around, of course, William Byron, Matt Benedetto. They had made contact, slowed down, lost momentum, and he got around him. A question I think NASCAR needs to evaluate, and maybe everyone else needs to consider, when Denny Hamlin avoided the wrecking cars of the 17 and 20 on that last lap, is it expected of Denny Hamlin to try to then come back up, in which he would have been behind the 24 and the 21, or stay below there because they were making contact and assuming that they may wreck, stay down there? That's where I think NASCAR was put in a really hard spot to make a really tricky call. Definitely, I know I've only seen the video the same number of times all the viewers saw it on NBC, but definitely this is something I think for Grid Tonight we'll have to revisit because it's just one of those rules where it really puts NASCAR in a position to make a judgment call. And as you had mentioned, we saw Chase Elliott. They filed formal protest, got their call reversed. But definitely we want to thank all our fans for chatting in the chat room, asking your questions. Be sure to like and subscribe to us. We are on YouTube, the Grid Network. You can also visit gridrankin.com to find all our social media accounts. Just an update on the Grid Rankin. Scott McLaughlin still leads the Grid Rankin right now. Lewis Hamilton is now up to second place since Kevin Harvick had a pretty poor performance today, finishing outside the top 10. Kevin Harvick's in third, and Denny Hamlin's now up to fourth place. So definitely we'll be having the full ranking later on our Twitter at Grid Rankin. Please help us expand and sign up to be one of our Patreon supporters. We'll love to have your support because definitely we want to be there expanding so that way we could as well be at the racetrack next year. And definitely, I know we have another viewer. Judgment call stinks. Get rid of double yellow rule. Haha. Great job, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching us. And we encourage everyone to follow us. We'll see you next time on Grid Tonight on Wednesday. For Kobe Lambeth at the podium finish, I'm Joe San Diego. Have a good night. We'll see you next time.